You are now tuned in to Hip Hop Caucus's Rhythm and Bloom, a conversation about how we get closer to Black and Brown liberation and climate justice around the world. I'm Jarrell Clay, your Associate Senior Director for Digital and Production, and today we'll be joined by Jasmine Gil, the Associate Senior Director for Think 100%. We are here at the Very Sad Lab, hosted at the Cats and Art Center at American University. Very Sad Lab is a plant rehabilitation center by artist and educator Nayoku Wasugi, and we are very humbled and excited to be hosting our conversation here today. Behind me is Imka, who will be using one of the plants in this office to make music based on unique biodata from the plant. So let's get it. We are joined by Jasmine Gil. It's always a beautiful day in the district when Jasmine comes up from North Carolina. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jarrell. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So today we are getting into a conversation about petrochemicals. Petrochemicals is a word that you don't often hear, but is associated with the plastics industry and everything that we have, from our water bottles to our credit cards to anything you could think of is literally manufactured with this thing called a petrochemical. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into that particular form of manufacturing, just starting with the basic question: what are petrochemicals and how is it linked to the plastics industry?
Great question, Jarrell. I like to tell everybody that petrochemicals is everything that goes into and onto our bodies, and we don't even realize it. It helps manufacture some of the simple plastics that you think about everyday usage, such as Tupperware or plastic bags, things of that nature. But it also helps produce things like cosmetics, soaps, detergents. It's known as a building block, so to speak. That includes chemicals like ethylene, which also cause and has been known to be connected to increasing risk of cancer, certain other illnesses such as respiratory illnesses. And so it's a chemical that's slowly killing us and we don't even know it or see it, and sometimes even feel it until it's exasperated in large amounts, which typically comes through the industry itself, setting up fossil fuel facilities near our homes is what's exasperating that effect. And now we are feeling the impacts of it because it's being built right next to our communities.
Wow. We talk about silent killers in our community all the time. This is the perfect example of what a silent killer could do to our communities, because most of us don't even know that it could be in our air and our food and what we consume on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
This brings me to a lot of artists and influencers who have impact, right? Last year around this time, Burna Boy wrote a letter to this thing called the Plastics Treaty, talking about how petrochemicals and particularly the manufacturing of plastics in his home country of Nigeria was just killing folks like left and right, and they needed to do something about the pollution that exists there from that, and how can we do more to advocate for things that we know will bring us climate justice.
Well, first, shout out to Burna Boy and every artist that's using their platform to bring light to the many issues that are impacting our communities. It's so important, it's so underrated, and it's so appreciated at the Hip Hop Caucus, because we understand that no voice is stronger than the personal story, right? And so being able to share his personal experience and connection to petrochemicals is incredibly important.
Nothing about us without us. You said it perfectly. I think that when we get into, especially conversations where we're pushing and urging elected officials to do what we elected them to do, right? We often see that these stories are interconnected. A lot of what we do here in the U.S. South is transcending to fights, struggles, and often journeys to the win in the global South as well. But the thing that links that interconnected struggle for us is our cultural expression, but also some of the solutions look similar based on some of the administrations we're fighting. How can more marginalized communities, let's say, use the power of organizing to then build up against some of these systems that feel so gigantic, so impossible to beat? But we've seen it done before. How can we replicate some of that for our climate justice movement?
Great question. I often feel that typically these industries bet on our lack of hope. They bet on us feeling like we are hopeless, that we are up against Goliath, so to speak. But to directly address your question, people really, it's something that we drive at the Hip Hop Caucus, is we really are focused on that localized regional impact of taking each site fight one at a time. And some people may feel that that's like kind of trying to find a needle in a haystack, so to speak, but it's extremely impactful, because anything that you can do to slow down these industries, whether that's helping to attend a public commenting period at a hearing to slow down a permit that they're trying to get to expand that facility, if it's trying to stop the facility from being created anew, every time you show up that you help delay that process, you're helping to stop that facility from getting that expansion, from getting that building permit. By slowing down these facilities, essentially what we're doing is we're not only stopping the expansion and building process, but we're also creating more resistance for that company. We're also creating more financial responsibility for them. And the more you delay, the less likely it is that that building will happen, the less likely it is that that certain facility will expand. And so they look elsewhere. And so one thing that we do outside of the local regional fights is we say, okay, we've stopped you from building here, but we're saying no, you can't build here, but you can't build in another place either. And so that's why our work is across the nation. It's also the reason why our work is international, because what we don't want these facilities to do is to believe that just because they're not building within the United States domestically, that means that they can go internationally. Hence is the reason why we're involved in the Global Plastics Treaty, as well, because that work expands past the United States. It expands past the Global South.
I love these conversations with you, Jasmine, because you take it local and you bring it global for everyone to see how this is an international issue. You bring it right back to the communities that we fight for every day, right? Black, brown, and indigenous people within the states, but also how those fights are interconnected. One thing that I would love to hear you expand on is how much we have to fight from a narrative perspective, because we know what the industry's approach is to expanding these industries, or expanding the industry. How do we combat that with our own narrative strategy around stopping the expansion?
I think the argument that you hear the most from these industries is that these facilities are creating jobs. You're almost unable to measure the amount of jobs that are coming in locally. And then when you are able to measure them, it's significantly lower than what they said that it would be. And so we're looking at, depending on a industry economically that is not providing to our communities or not investing into our communities. If anything, they're not only taking away from our health, but they're also taking away from our economy of being able to bring in cleaner, greener jobs, where we're able to have people work and be able to make a living that not only helps take care of their family, but also creates healthier, cleaner air in their environments.
So we talked about the who, right? The who is the petrochemical industry. We talked about the what, where, and why. Let's get into the how. How can people get involved? What activations are Hip Hop Caucus doing to make sure that we get a little bit closer to the liberation we deserve?
The good thing, but also bad thing, is that these industries are constantly trying to set up shop in our communities. And so you will hear very often that a permit is trying to be passed to either grow or expand a certain facility. And it's extremely important to just get involved with local environmental groups on the ground who are fighting the good fight, so to speak. Show up at these hearings, talk about, what you're smelling in the air when it comes from these facilities. Talk about the health impacts that you're experiencing. The thing I like to tell people all the time is your story is stronger than anything else. You know exactly what it is that your community is going through. You know, mom is getting sicker. You know, grandparents are getting certain respiratory illnesses because they're not breathing in good air. And so with that being said, the more you show up at these permit hearings, at the community hearings, and learn about these facilities, the better. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just continuing to push our administration to address the issue at the root, at the plastic treaty negotiations. The more we have people voicing the need and calling out for these demands, the better we are off. And that goes back to getting involved at a local and regional scale. There are groups that will be moving forward this work at the Plastics Treaty. It's important that we support them. It's important that we uplift their voices.
I love it. I love it. Look at that. Petrochemical 101, and it's fitting that we did that at a university. Thank you so much. I learned something today. I hope y'all did too. Thank you for tuning in to Rhythm and Bloom. If you'd like to get more involved with Hip Hop Caucus, head over to hiphopcaucus.org or follow Hip Hop Caucus on all social media platforms. You can also text CLIMATE to 79591 to get more involved in the climate justice fight.